Are we alone or not in the universe? Are we being visited by extraterrestrials? Are governments involved in a decades-long conspiracy to cover up the truth about an alien presence here on Earth? These are some of the biggest and most profound questions we can ask ourselves. But what happens if we get the answers to these questions? And what if they confirm everything the UFO community has long suspected? What then? For decades, a believer versus skeptic dogfight has raged over the topic of UFOs. Some people are convinced that UFOs are extraterrestrial in origin, while others dismiss the phenomenon as a mixture of misidentifications, hoaxes, and delusions. The debate has continued for over 70 years, beginning in the summer of 1947. That's when hysteria swept the United States, with multiple sightings of strange craft that the media called flying saucers. And that's when the US Army Air Force recovered what they referred to as a flying disc after it crashed near a small New Mexico town by the name of Roswell. What if the debate about UFOs was resolved definitively today? What if we found out that it was all true? Then we'd have to set aside the old debates and get to the really interesting questions. How would the news be announced, and who'd announce it? If we received a message from extraterrestrials, should we reply, and what should we say? What effect would disclosure have on politics, religion, science, philosophy, and every other aspect of society? And what might alien technology look like? My name's Nick Pope, and I ran the British government's UFO project. Drawing on knowledge and experience that I acquired in the course of my work at the UK Ministry of Defence, I'm going to address some of these questions. I'm going to look into the future, beyond disclosure, and I'm going to show how, if we find aliens, or if they find us, the world will change forever. Disclosure might take any number of different forms, from the detection of a signal from a long-dead civilization, through to that beloved staple of science fiction movies, the alien invasion. With all the possibilities and all the variables, how can we know what will happen, or even attempt to predict what the effects will be? As it happens, some of the deepest thinkers on the face of the planet have had detailed discussions on these very questions. Their answers may surprise you, and yet, what's most surprising of all is how few people know these discussions have taken place. Don't worry, I was there, and I'm going to let you in on the secret of what happened. The discussions I'm referring to took place not at the Ministry of Defence, but at the Royal Society in 2010 at two discussion meetings. The first was called The Detection of Extraterrestrial Life and the Consequences for Science and Society, while the second was titled Towards a Scientific and Societal Agenda on Extraterrestrial Life. A little background on the Royal Society. Founded way back in 1660, it's probably the most prestigious scientific organization in the world. Its members have included some of the most accomplished scientists of all time: Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, Albert Einstein, and Stephen Hawking, to name but a few. In 2018, they elected Elon Musk as a fellow. In 1919, they organized an expedition to film a solar eclipse as part of a famous experiment that verified Einstein's theory of relativity. Their journal, Philosophical Transactions, was first published in 1665. It's the world's oldest scientific journal, and in addition to the famous names I've mentioned, contributors have included Benjamin Franklin and Michael Faraday. The Royal Society has a role not just in acting as a forum for scientific discussion and debate, but in shaping scientific policy in academia and in the British government. If you wanted to take the issue of alien life to the very heart of the scientific establishment, this is where you would take it. And that's exactly what happened. I attended all sessions of both meetings and had the opportunity to discuss some of the key issues with many of the speakers and attendees, sometimes in the formal sessions, but more often than not in the breaks over coffee and cookies. In truth, that's often where the most fascinating information crops up at any scientific conference. And yes, plenty of the distinguished scientists in attendance dunked cookies in their coffee, just like everyone else does. Attendance wasn't huge, but it was a real case of quality, not quantity. Most of the leading scientists doing work on this issue were there. The first meeting was a 2-day affair held on January 25th and 26th, 2010, in London. It was a multidisciplinary gathering, featuring not only astronomers, cosmologists, physicists, chemists, biologists and astrobiologists, but also psychologists, anthropologists and theologians. It would probably strike people as surprising that anthropologists, best known for studying primitive cultures in faraway places, have turned their minds to questions such as how we communicate with extraterrestrials, or that theologians, who undertake academic studies of faith, have considered the religious implications of finding alien life. All these scientists and academics came together to discuss the search for extraterrestrial life. Where and how are scientists searching? How is the search progressing? And most intriguingly, what happens if we find alien life? What will be the effect on people's worldview? Will there be panic in the streets? How will people's religious beliefs be affected? The attendees included representatives from NASA, the European Space Agency, and the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Yes, they have one. The speakers included Colin Pellinger, designer of the ill-fated Beagle 2 spacecraft that was to have looked for evidence of life on Mars in 2003, but went out of contact when its solar panels failed to deploy. And then there was Frank Drake, the radio astronomer who was the first person to send a message into space in a deliberate attempt to signal our presence to extraterrestrials. Other attendees included Jill Tarter from the SETI Institute, inspiration for the character Ellie Arroway in the science fiction movie Contact, which was based on a book written by the late Carl Sagan. Lord Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal and President of the Royal Society, chaired a number of the sessions. In discussing the search for extraterrestrial life and the consequences of finding it, it was felt that there were 3 basic scenarios. The first is the discovery of microbial life somewhere in our own solar system, probably on Mars, Europa, or Enceladus. The second is the detection, via radio astronomy, of a radio signal from a civilization that we may never meet and which might well be extinct by the time we receive the signal, which could have been sent millions of years ago. The third and final scenario is actually encountering other intelligent beings. The archetypal landing on the White House lawn, popularized by the classic 1951 science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. So with all this in mind, let's look at one of the big issues that came up for discussion. It's a question that comes up again and again in relation to disclosure, and it's cited by many as being a reason why governments might want to cover up the truth about UFOs. The question is this: how would people respond? Not our political leaders or our greatest scientists, but everyday folk, teachers, store workers, farmers, or factory workers. Would there be wonder? Would there be quiet acceptance? Or, and this is one of the great cliches about aliens, might there be panic in the streets? If we discover alien life, many people think there will be mass panic. If we faced an alien invasion, as happens in science fiction movies such as Independence Day or War of the Worlds, clearly that would be true. On the subject of War of the Worlds, in 1938, the radio dramatization of the original H.G. Wells novel, narrated and directed by Orson Welles, is said to have caused widespread panic when many listeners thought the fictional Martian invasion was real. But times have changed. Delegates at the Royal Society suggested that an announcement that extraterrestrial life had been discovered would have little effect. Opinion polls already show that large numbers of people believe in alien life, with many being certain we're already being visited, and further believing that our political leaders aren't telling us everything that they know about UFOs. Add to this the fact that science fiction movies have embedded the concept of visiting extraterrestrials firmly in people's minds, and there isn't a problem. The bottom line is that you don't shock people by telling them something that they already believe. Is there a way we could test this? As it happens, there is, and it's already happened. In 1996, NASA announced they'd found a Martian meteorite with evidence of fossilized microbes. President Clinton made an announcement. David Bowie's song Life on Mars got a lot of airplay, but there was no panic in the streets and nobody ran for the hills. If the truth is out there, or down here, apparently we can take it. If we do find extraterrestrial life, and if it's more than just picking up a signal or finding alien microbes, will they be friendly, like the lovable alien in E.T., or will they be something like the aliens in the movie Independence Day, coming here to exterminate us? Views at the Royal Society were split. Frank Drake and others believed that we might have much to gain in terms of scientific knowledge. Even if we never meet aliens face to face, it's been suggested that civilizations might broadcast information about themselves. Science writer Timothy Ferris came up with the idea of a sort of galactic internet. I use the term a cosmic Facebook. What if we could tap into this? It would be like accessing what the great science fiction writer Isaac Asimov called the Encyclopedia Galactica. Now, that's a book I'd like to read. Other attendees at the Royal Society pointed out what's happened in our own history when a technologically advanced society has encountered a more primitive one. Our trying to find aliens, some believe, would be like the Aztecs seeking out the conquistadors. If the cosmic phone rings, said Professor Simon Conway Morris, a paleontologist at the University of Cambridge, don't answer. Professor Stephen Hawking wasn't at the Royal Society that day, but his warning about this is even more famous. Here's what he said. If aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. It's too late, of course. We've been a detectable civilization for decades, as our television and radio signals have leaked out into space. As Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute has pointed out, any civilization capable of threatening us is already aware of us. In the War of the Worlds, the invading aliens were finally wiped out by terrestrial bacteria. If we encounter extraterrestrial life, even if it's just microbes, might we share the same fate? Some delegates thought this was a real risk and said it was vital that strict control should be put in place to deal with any biological material brought back from space missions. There's the related ethical issue, even on uninhabited worlds, of whether terrestrial microbes from an unsterilized spacecraft might contaminate other planets, perhaps destroying an emerging extraterrestrial ecosystem, or altering a planet's conditions to the extent that extraterrestrial life could never arise. What right do we have to do this? If any of this sounds like science fiction, it isn't. NASA has people engaged in handling policy on these very issues, which they call back contamination and forward contamination. The NASA section responsible for this work is called the Office of Planetary Protection. It sounds like something out of a superhero movie. It's often stated that the discovery of other civilizations would undermine and perhaps shatter world religions. Attendees at the Royal Society weren't so sure. Professor Ted Peters, a theologian who's taught at the University of California in Berkeley, briefed the meeting on some survey results that suggested that rather than undermining people's religious beliefs, whatever their faith, it would strengthen them by making God's creation seem even bigger and more wonderful. There was an amusing postscript, which probably said more about religion than about aliens. Peters found that while those questioned thought their own religion would be mature enough to adapt to the new paradigm, they felt other religions would struggle. Not everyone agreed that religious people would so easily incorporate the existence of aliens into their worldview. The physicist Paul Davies, a professor at Arizona State University, thought that Christians, in particular, would have a problem, given their central belief that Jesus died to save us from our sins. If we discover other civilizations, he said, it would raise the awkward question of why Jesus had died to save just human beings. It's not just the Royal Society where such issues are discussed. In September 2014, a two-day conference was held in Washington, D.C. Entitled Preparing for Discovery, talks and panel discussions had titles that included Communicating with the Other, The Moral Status of Non-Human Organisms, Practical Impact, How Should Society Cope with Discovery, and even Would You Baptize an Extraterrestrial? This wasn't a UFO conference or an event put on by an alien-themed religious cult. It was an astrobiology symposium, and it was jointly sponsored and organized by NASA and the Library of Congress. Of all the major world religions, the Catholic Church in particular seems to be positioning itself carefully on the question of alien life. In May 2008, José Gabriel Funes, head of the Vatican's observatory, gave an interview where he said that extraterrestrial life might exist. He went on to make the following statement. This is not in contradiction with our faith, because we cannot establish limits to God's creative freedom. Does the Catholic Church know something, or suspect something's coming? That's certainly what many people in the UFO community believe. There's a related question that wasn't discussed at the Royal Society. What might alien religion look like? It's one thing to speculate on what effect finding aliens might have on human religions, but what religious beliefs might extraterrestrial civilizations have? We can only speculate, but like the Catholic Church, it might be prudent to start thinking about some of this, because some of the possibilities are staggering in their implications, and we may be in for a rude awakening. Here are some possible scenarios. If there is a God, aliens might be in direct communication. Perhaps when any life form reaches a certain degree of advancement, it becomes aware of God and communicates freely and openly. That would raise troubling questions for humanity, such as why God would be selective in interactions with different organisms. Whether there is or isn't an actual God, another possibility is that extraterrestrials will worship a God we've never heard of, and that they have a whole set of religious texts, rules, and rituals that will strike us as crazy. In such a scenario, the human race had better hope that adherents of such an alien religion aren't crusading extremists who'd regard us as infidels to be wiped out, or, at best, forcibly converted. Stephen Hawking's analogy about European explorers and Native Americans comes to mind again. Another possible scenario is that advanced civilizations regard religious belief as primitive superstition, and that they've discarded it in favor of science and reason. We, after all, have set aside many primitive superstitions and beliefs as we've progressed. Might aliens regard religious belief in much the same way as we regard children who believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy? It's something that's fun for the kids, but it's not real, and you grow out of it. Perhaps we'll find that there are many competing religions out there in the cosmos, with some civilizations being believers, some being agnostics, and some being atheists. As with the main religions here on Earth, alien religions might share a few basic common beliefs and principles, but might be at war with each other. And within individual religions, there might be shades of belief, with some followers being liberal and others taking views that we'd regard as fundamentalist or orthodox. In other words, the position out there in space might be pretty much what it is down here on Earth. As above, so below. There's a final possibility, which is both intriguing, frightening, and actually quite a likely scenario. What if we were to encounter a civilization so powerful, so knowledgeable, that they were, in all practical senses, indistinguishable from our concept of a god? Is it really that far-fetched? If we managed to create life in a test tube one day, and plenty of people are trying, would that make us God? The same question arises if we create artificial intelligence that becomes self-aware. Some theoretical physicists believe there are an infinite number of parallel universes. But what if one day in the future, perhaps as part of a science experiment, we create a whole new universe? Does that make us the literal creator? Returning to the Royal Society, who would take the lead in dealing with first contact? As one attendee put it, if an alien spacecraft docks with the International Space Station, do we call the Defense Department or the State Department? One proposal was that the United Nations should take the lead. There's an intriguing precedent. The Voyager 1 spacecraft, currently on its way to the stars, contained a message from the Secretary General of the United Nations. In part, this read, "I send greetings on behalf of the people of our planet. We step out of our solar system into the universe, seeking only peace and friendship." This question of who speaks for planet Earth was to carry forward into the second Royal Society conference. And just as discussions about religion caused a row at the first meeting, questions about replying to a message from aliens would cause disagreements at the second gathering. The second of the Royal Society discussion meetings held in 2010 was even more fascinating and even more controversial than the first. The title, "Towards a Scientific and Societal Agenda on Extraterrestrial Life," sounded like something from a UFO conference or a science fiction convention. Again, it was difficult to believe I was at the prestigious Royal Society. The main controversy at the meeting stemmed from one thing: METI. SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, relates to the use of radio telescopes to listen for a signal from other civilizations. It's a passive search strategy. METI, sometimes known as active SETI, stands for Messaging to Extraterrestrial Intelligence. In other words, replying to any message we receive from aliens, or unilaterally broadcasting messages into space in an attempt to alert other civilizations to our existence. And that's when things got heated. Some SETI scientists want to move into METI. One reason is the theory that extraterrestrials might not initiate contact, but might respond to a message we send, perhaps because of a rule like Star Trek's Prime Directive, precluding uninvited contact with newly emerging civilizations. It was suggested that our being proactive might serve as some sort of trigger point as we cross a threshold that makes us interesting. After all, if we live in a crowded universe, we shouldn't kid ourselves that we're that unusual or that interesting to truly advanced civilizations. Some METI has already been done. For example, the cosmic calls transmitted in 1999 and 2003 from the Evpatoria radar installation in Ukraine under the supervision of the Russian astronomer Alexander Zaitsev. The SETI Institute's Earth Speaks project has attempted to engage the public on the question of what we might say to an extraterrestrial civilization and asked for suggestions on what we might transmit. The ideas ranged from the poignant to the comical, with my favourite being, "Hi, be careful, we are deadly, and it's pretty boring here anyway, so don't bother coming." Author and futurist David Brin felt strongly that there ought to be a moratorium on METI until such time as an informed debate could take place. There was talk of sages being consulted, but no consensus on who these sages might be, or whether the other 6 billion of us might get a say. Brin felt objectors to METI were being ridiculed with Hollywood stereotypes about evil aliens, and said this showed a disappointing lack of imagination. He asked what was wrong with having a debate on the subject, as such a debate would be responsible, interesting, and fun. Seth Shostak, senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, took the opposite view. He said that any attempts to prescribe METI were rooted in paranoia and would be anti-science. He saw no point in any consultation process because it wasn't clear who would have the right to decide or how it would help us pick the right answer. He also wondered how, short of launching missile strikes against facilities engaged in METI, any moratorium could actually be enforced. And he reiterated the argument that we've been a detectable civilization for decades anyway, saying that the horse had left the barn long ago. The closest thing there is to any regulation of all this is the SETI community's Declaration of Principles concerning the conduct of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. This revised document was unanimously adopted by the SETI Permanent Study Group of the International Academy of Astronautics on September 30th, 2010. It states that, in the case of the confirmed detection of a signal, signatories to this declaration will not respond without first seeking guidance and consent of a broadly representative international body such as the United Nations. However, none of this covers METI, and in any case, the agreement is between individuals and non-governmental organizations, not between nations. And it's not legally enforceable. One of the speakers at this second Royal Society meeting was Professor Mazlan Othman, a Malaysian astrophysicist who was director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. The week before the meeting, numerous media outlets carried a story that she was being appointed as an alien ambassador, a spokeswoman for planet Earth if ET comes calling. Rumours flew around the UFO and conspiracy theory communities that an alien signal had been detected and that an announcement was imminent. The Royal Society meeting itself was seen as being part of this process, and when the alien ambassador story was denied, this started rumours of a cover-up. At the meeting, Othman made it clear that the story was false and derived from a mistaken interpretation of the point that she did make. That is, that her UN office and the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPUOS, might be appropriate forums for managing the global response to the discovery of extraterrestrial life. Othman set out some ideas on the process whereby the various issues that would arise from the discovery or detection of extraterrestrial life, scientific, societal, legal, and ethical, might be brought to the UN. As a potential precedent for this process, she referred to the issue of potentially threatening near-Earth objects, comets and asteroids, which is being addressed by experts working with COPUOS and other organizations. Her message was clear: come to COPUOS with a degree of consensus. But as the row over METI illustrates, we're a long way from consensus. So now, let's step away from these extraordinary Royal Society meetings and ask ourselves this: what would happen in the real world today if we picked up a message from another civilization? Would we reply? Of course we would. It's our nature as human beings to be curious. We'd want to know more and we'd reach out. Who would reply? Anyone and everyone with access to the technology. In reality, no single individual would reply, because no single individual could ever speak for planet Earth, irrespective of whether they're a politician, a religious leader, a scientist, or just an ordinary citizen. Following on from that, there'd be no single message. Different people would say different things, many of which would contradict each other. It would be a confusing cacophony of voices. And guess what? That's who we are. That's planet Earth. A little earlier, I speculated about extraterrestrial civilizations so powerful and so knowledgeable that they'd be able to do everything that a god could do. Arthur C. Clarke was an inventor, futurist, and author who wrote the screenplay for the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey and the short story on which the film was based. He once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's what we're going to look at now. The technology that advanced extraterrestrials might possess. Before we look in detail at what alien technology might look like, let's consider what sort of a head start extraterrestrial civilizations might have over us. Our universe is nearly 14 billion years old, so it's possible to imagine there might be civilizations out there millions of years ahead of our own. Think about that for a moment. The Industrial Revolution took place in the 18th and 19th centuries. We moved rapidly from largely rural agricultural societies to our modern and increasingly urban world. So let's go back to our 14 billion year old universe and the possibility that there are civilizations out there millions of years more advanced than human beings. If 200 or 300 years got us from a horse and cart to a stealth fighter and a space rocket, what might a further 100 million years of progress bring? Come and join me on a speculative journey into the future. Before we fast forward millions of years into the future to see what alien technology might look like, is there any way we could ground this in reality? Is it all just guesswork, or is there something a little more definitive? I don't have a real time machine, of course, but strange though it may sound, I do have a way of telling you what the world might be like in the future. Specifically, in the year 2045. The predictions come from a UK Ministry of Defence document entitled Global Strategic Trends Out to 2045. The 172-page paper was drawn up by the Development, Concepts and Doctrine Centre and is freely available on the MOD's website. The study was drawn up because technology is moving so fast that it's important for the MOD to try to make some predictions about how the world may change so that the military is prepared for the next war, not the last one. Global Strategic Trends Out to 2045 goes much further than trying to look at the military. After all, whether it's fighting wars, intercepting drug runners, or carrying out humanitarian relief operations, the military doesn't operate in isolation. That's why this sensational study goes far beyond looking at military matters and makes predictions about how the world may change socially, politically, and economically, as well as looking at how advances in science and technology may make the world in 2045 unrecognizable from the world we know today. So let's focus on the technology. Here are some specific predictions from this amazing British government study. Combat robots may increasingly replace infantry soldiers. In one of the report's most intriguing pieces of speculation, this could actually make war more likely because leaders might be less cautious about casualties if they were risking robots and not human beings. Even more disturbingly, weaponized viruses and genetically targeted weapons may be possible and could be used not just in conventional warfare, but by rogue states or terrorists. Some experts believe that quantum computing will make all codes breakable, because all conceivable codes could be tried simultaneously. This would render personal privacy virtually impossible. As things stand, computer processing power doubles every 3 years. By 2023, some computers may have processing power equal to that of a human brain, and by 2045, they could be 100,000 times more powerful. And if quantum computing really does turn out to be possible, nobody knows what the limit would be. In the science fiction movie The Terminator, the Skynet computer defense network became self-aware when it became sufficiently powerful, then fought back against its human creators when they panicked and tried to shut it down, triggering a nuclear holocaust. Could true artificial intelligence be possible one day soon, with science fiction becoming science fact? Entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk certainly think so. Robots are already a reality, and like computers, their power and sophistication is only going to increase. Quite apart from the combat robots mentioned earlier, and more robots in the workplace, the MOD report suggests that by 2045, many robots will be able to perceive their environments, make decisions, and take actions on their own initiative. Additionally, it may be possible to design robots that are virtually indistinguishable from humans. Given the aging population, by 2045, much of elder care will likely be delegated to robots, at least in the developed world. The study suggests that childcare and education are areas where robots will play a huge role by 2045. The long-term psychological consequences of children forming emotional bonds with robots can't be predicted. The report isn't all doom and gloom. It suggests that technology could come to our rescue in some potentially amazing ways. While the report doesn't promise eternal life just yet, it does suggest that a game-changing medical breakthrough might dramatically extend human lifespans. A cancer cure is possible, while DNA engineering could correct genetic defects. Artificial limbs that are connected to the nervous system are already being developed, and this technology is going to improve dramatically over the next few years. Another possibility is that a technological breakthrough could give us almost unlimited, cheap, clean energy. Such a breakthrough could involve harnessing the energy of the sun to split seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. If, as predicted, artificial organs and mind-controlled prosthetic limbs hold out the hope of curing previously fatal conditions and restoring quality of life to the injured, might further enhancements be possible? One of the most sensational sections of the MOD study is titled Human Augmentation and lists a number of ways in which human beings may be able to enhance themselves physically and cognitively. Implants to restore sight, for example, may be further developed to enable humans to see beyond the range of visual light and into other parts of the spectrum. Hearing aids could be similarly enhanced to pick up sounds currently undetectable to humans. Even more profoundly, a combination of surgical implants and drugs might enable us to control fear, increase motivation, and enhance learning and memory. When combined with highly functional prosthetic limbs and exoskeletons, this could result in the creation of a literal Superman. Here are a few direct quotes from the British government report. some augmentation of humans with embedded sensors and computing devices is likely to occur within the 2045 timeframe. Mind-controlled machinery is likely to become much more sophisticated, with human brain-to-brain communication possible by 2045. By 2045, it is even possible, though unlikely, that the sharp distinctions between people and machine will disappear. As well as potentially transforming both sensing and decision-making, direct brain linkage could have profound implications for social interaction and for the notion of what it means to be an individual human being. Notions of individuality could be challenged, possibly leading to questioning of loyalties and allegiances to organizations as individual and group identities merge. It is possible that direct brain-to-brain communication may be achieved by 2045, transforming ways of working. These methods could involve collaboration and using directly shared knowledge and experience between humans, and potentially between humans and other species. Yes, this really is all in a UK Ministry of Defence study published on their website. So if that's what the world will be like in less than 30 years, what technology might aliens possess now if they have a few million years head start on us? This is the technology that we might acquire any time we tap into the galactic internet, or any time after extraterrestrials make open contact. In our endless speculation about alien life, we must guard against making assumptions stemming from our anthropocentric perspective. However, if we're being visited by extraterrestrials, there's one assumption about alien technology that it's 100% safe to make. They have viable interstellar travel. It's the single most impactful piece of alien technology we could ever hope to acquire, and acquire it we must, because if we don't, it'll mean the end of the human race and the end of all life on Earth. The motto of the UK's Royal Air Force is Per Ardua ad Astra, which translates from Latin to through adversity to the stars. That might start a few conspiracy theories in and of itself. The motto, or rather the second half of it, also turns up in the name of a private organisation started by musician Tom DeLonge. His To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science aims to do serious research and investigation of the UFO phenomenon, and aspires to unlock some of the technologies they believe lie behind what we're dealing with. Technologies they believe may be hidden away in so-called black budget programs. And if you think it's far-fetched that a punk musician would be fronting a serious research effort, think again. The To the Stars Academy's team of expert advisors includes various high-powered individuals with backgrounds in government, the military, and the intelligence community, as well as theoretical physicists and aeronautical engineers. So let's look at the one piece of alien technology everyone wants to get their hands on: a spaceship that would literally take us to the stars. 12 human beings have been to the moon. It's as far as we've got in our space program, which has its roots in Nazi rocket technology, developed in the Second World War by the German scientist Wernher von Braun. At the end of the war, von Braun was brought to America with other scientists as part of a once secret initiative codenamed Operation Paperclip. He and some of his fellow scientists put their expertise to work in the Cold War, and it was his Saturn V launch vehicle that took the Apollo missions to the moon. It was a long way. The moon is around 240,000 miles from Earth. Pretty impressive. Next stop, Mars. We've sent plenty of probes there already, but still no astronauts. One reason is the distance. Even at its closest approach, Mars is around 34 million miles from Earth. Let's put that into perspective. Light travels at a speed of around 186,000 miles per second. Yes, that's per second, not per hour. At that speed, light takes around 1.5 seconds to get from Earth to the Moon, but over 3 minutes to get to Mars. But if humankind is ever to travel outside our solar system, to planets orbiting other stars, we're going to need to go further and faster. A whole lot further and a whole lot faster. Because while light takes 3 minutes to get to Mars, it takes over 4 years to get to the nearest star aside from our own sun. And it's not just a case of you're going to need a bigger rocket. We'd need a whole new physics. Or rather, a spacecraft that uses a propulsion system radically different from anything we can currently build. If we are being visited by extraterrestrials, the aliens have found out how to do this. Theoretical physicists have come up with a few ideas on how it might be done, and you'll probably recognize most of them from science fiction. If we're talking about traveling slower than the speed of light, then a propulsion system that uses nuclear fission or matter-antimatter annihilation might get us to a respectable speed. But it would still take years to reach even the nearest handful of stars, and we really don't have the scientific knowledge or the engineering expertise to do this at present. And don't forget the engineering, by the way. Theoretical physics is fine in a research paper, but if we're talking starships, somebody has got to build it. Realistically, for viable interstellar travel, we'd need faster than light travel. According to our current understanding of physics, accelerating an object past light speed is impossible. While our understanding of the laws of physics constantly evolves as we figure out more things, light speed seems to be an impenetrable barrier. Our best hope is that there's a workaround. Maybe warping space-time, which is the theoretical physics used in the Star Trek franchise, or using wormholes, which crop up in other sci-fi movies. Or maybe it's something we simply haven't conceived of yet. However we do it, it would be the ultimate technological game changer. It's not just something that would be nice to have. This is a must-have. No longer would all our eggs be in one basket here on Earth. Whether it's nuclear war, global pandemic, or an asteroid strike, as long as we're confined to a single world, we're desperately vulnerable. And even if we avoid a sudden global catastrophe, one day life on Earth will become impossible. Our sun will heat up and expand, and eventually the Earth will be burnt to a cinder. This is all millions of years in the future, but the day will come. If we haven't developed viable interstellar travel by then, we'll go extinct, as will all life on Earth. If we can reach the stars, spread out and colonize the galaxy, and then other galaxies, we'll never again be vulnerable to a single disaster that could wipe us out. Humanity will have achieved a form of immortality. This is the prize on offer, if only we can acquire interstellar travel. As any civilization becomes more technologically advanced, its energy needs increase. That brings us to another of the very few reasonable assumptions we can make about alien technology, namely this. They'll have access to ways of generating or harnessing vast amounts of energy. I'm not talking about coal, oil, gas or nuclear power, and neither am I talking about wind or hydroelectric power. I'm not even talking about solar power, at least not in the conventional way. Again, it's not just that we need a bigger or better way of doing something we're already doing. We need something new. In speculating about advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, the renowned physicist Freeman Dyson proposed the idea that an artificial structure could be built so large that it would effectively encase an entire star, thus harnessing vast amounts of energy. Intriguingly, such theoretical megastructures are seen by some scientists as being our best hope of finding the location of other civilizations, as a so-called Dyson sphere might be something that could be detected in the same way that we locate exoplanets by watching the light of a star dip as a planet transits in front of it. In October 2015, there was speculation that light fluctuation from a star nicknamed Tabby's star might be evidence of just such a megastructure. In 2016, a second candidate star emerged. Research is continuing. Dyson spheres are related to another bit of scientific speculation about extraterrestrial civilizations, known as the Kardashev scale. First proposed by the Russian astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev, the scale has 3 points. A Type 1 civilization is defined as one that can harness all the energy from their sun that reaches the surface of their planet. A Type 2 civilization is defined as one that can harness the energy of an entire star, for example, by using a Dyson sphere. A Type 3 civilization could harness the energy of an entire galaxy, simultaneously harvesting power from all its stars. Just to put that into perspective, our galaxy, the Milky Way, is thought to contain around 100 billion stars. Using this scale, humanity hasn't even attained the status of being a Type 1 civilization. Physicist Michio Kaku thinks we might get there in around 200 or 300 years from now. If we can acquire extraterrestrial technology, maybe we can get there a whole lot quicker. A final thought on energy, and it was a point raised at the second of the 2 Royal Society meetings. Clément Vidal, a researcher at the Free University of Brussels, speculated that advanced civilizations might migrate towards black holes on the basis that in the known universe, they probably represent the ultimate energy source. That makes the vicinity of black holes a very good place for astronomers to look for evidence of extraterrestrial life. We've looked at 2 areas where we can make reasonable assumptions about what technology extraterrestrial civilizations might possess. Aside from interstellar travel and energy harnessing, there's a 3rd area I want to briefly mention, and that's weaponry. Those people who take a spiritual or New Age view of extraterrestrials like to think that advanced civilizations will have set aside war and violence. It's a nice thought, but I'm not so sure. After all, as human beings have made technological progress, we've developed ever more powerful and deadly weapons. With either nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons, we now hold in our hands tools that could bring about Armageddon. If we have such deadly weapons of mass destruction, what weapons might an extraterrestrial civilization possess if they're millions of years more advanced than us? We've gone from the bow and arrow to the thermonuclear bomb in just a few hundred years. What else might be out there? Extraterrestrials would probably possess weaponry capable of turning stars into supernovas or creating black holes that would devour entire planets. While Hollywood loves to make science fiction movies about alien invasions, most of which involve us somehow seeing off the invaders, it's wishful thinking. If Hernando Cortés and 600 Spanish conquistadors were capable of defeating and destroying the entire Aztec Empire with horses and guns, do we really think we could successfully resist an alien invasion? We'd probably be up against a civilization not a few hundred years more advanced than us, but millions of years ahead. If we ever did face an alien invasion, there's only one possible response: we surrender. In the final analysis, there are likely to be aspects of extraterrestrial technology that not only don't we understand, but that we could never understand. As the UK's Astronomer Royal, Sir Martin Rees, once said when speculating about extraterrestrials, just as a chimpanzee can't understand quantum theory, it could be that there are aspects of reality that are beyond the capacity of our brains. Former US Secretary of State for Defense Donald Rumsfeld once stated in a Defense Department brief on Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, "There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know." Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns are, perhaps, exactly what we'd be dealing with when it comes to alien technology. There's a final point about alien technology, and it's a philosophical point. Just because we could take a shortcut, should we? Whether it's tapping into the galactic internet or being gifted alien technology by benevolent visiting extraterrestrials, is it a form of cheating? It's a bit like a student being given all the test results before doing any studying. Isn't it part of the human experience to strive and to learn? To make progress slowly, through a process of trial and error? To struggle for something and not get handed it on a plate? Remember the Royal Air Force motto, "Through adversity to the stars"? I think the through adversity bit is important. I think that the development and evolution of intelligence is inextricably linked to problem solving. Charity fosters dependence. So the philosophical point is this: if we have a chance to tap into the galactic internet, to take a peek at the answers before the exam, should we? Simply put, if we're offered a starship, should we gratefully accept it? Or should we say, "Thank you, but we'll build our own"? There are no easy answers here, no right and wrong. If we decline the offer of a starship now, that's one thing. But if it happens at a point in the future, when our sun is expanding and when life on Earth is about to become unsustainable, that's another story. And what if we're talking about something else, like acquiring a cure for cancer? Arguing that working out these things for ourselves is better for the long-term intellectual evolution of the human race won't win much support from someone whose child is in hospital, critically ill with leukemia. Many people in the UFO community believe there's a conspiracy to cover up the truth about extraterrestrial life and alien visitation. They think that the intelligence agencies and the military-industrial complex are colluding to suppress the truth, keeping people in the dark about a game-changing fact that would require not just the rewriting of the history books, but a fundamental reassessment of humanity and our place in the wider cosmos. This all poses the question, why? Why keep any of this secret? There are lots of different theories, some of which we've looked at. Some people think it would cause panic in the streets or fundamentally undermine world religions, causing chaos, confusion, and bloodshed. Of course, the research presented at the Royal Society suggests these theories aren't correct. Other people say that UFO secrecy is because revelations would cause political chaos or undermine the international banking system. But there's no evidence for this, and frankly, we don't need aliens to cause political chaos or mess up the economy. We managed to do that all by ourselves. No, there's only one truly logical reason for UFO secrecy, and it's the technology. Even if governments are skeptical, they're in the game. That's because it's a low probability, high impact scenario, where even if you think it's unlikely, you have to be in the race because of the game-changing consequences that would result from being the first to acquire alien technology. Fear keeps even the most skeptical of governments interested, because if alien technology is out there, the only thing worse than not getting it first is your enemy acquiring it first. Ask yourself this: would the United States, for example, want Russia or China getting alien technology first? Or Iran? Or North Korea? Or ISIS? Of course not. Why? Because make no mistake about it, the nation on Earth that first acquires extraterrestrial technology will be the dominant power on the face of the planet for the foreseeable future, politically, militarily, economically, and culturally. Those are high stakes indeed, and certainly high enough to justify a little bit of what comes naturally to all governments: secrecy. Is there any proof of this? Absolutely. It comes courtesy of my former employers, the UK Ministry of Defence. As part of a programme to declassify and release most of their archive of UFO files, an intelligence assessment of the UFO phenomenon, codenamed Project Condign, was released. I helped set up the study in the early 90s, and an unintentionally amusing Defence Intelligence Staff document from 1995 set out the background when it stated this: if the sightings are of devices not of the Earth, then their purpose needs to be established as a matter of priority. There has been no apparent hostile intent, and other possibilities are: 1. Military reconnaissance, 2. Scientific, 3. Tourism. But here's the point. The intent was practical, as the document went on to set out when it stated, we could use this technology if it exists. There's an even bigger hint in the study's final report, dated 2000. One quote read as follows: the relevance of plasma and magnetic fields to UAP was an unexpected feature of the study. It is recommended that further investigation should be undertaken into the applicability of various characteristics in various novel military applications. While parts of the final report have been redacted because they're still classified, the following examples of these so-called novel military applications were given: very high power energy generation, RF weapons, impulse radars, air vehicle drag and radar signature reduction or control, and possibly for radar reflecting decoys. The reference to RF weapons was chilling. Radio frequency weapons are, effectively, directed energy weapons. Science fiction, so it seems, is becoming science fact. There was another throwaway line that supports the idea of competition between nations for this technology. there is evidence that scientists in the former Soviet Union have taken a particular interest in UFO phenomena. They have identified a close connection with plasma technologies and are pursuing related techniques for potential military purposes. By the way, unlike some documents circulating in the UFO community, there's no doubt about the authenticity of this one. After it was declassified, the Ministry of Defence published it on their website. It's now freely available on the website of the UK's National Archives. And don't think it's just governments that are in the game. Corporations are in the mix too. Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy has made no secret of this. The mission statement on their website talks about exotic science and technologies with the infrastructure and resources to rapidly transition them to products that can change the world. Their website lists the desired outputs of their science division as including engineering space-time and brain-computer interface, while the reference to an analysis center for UAPs and the public statements of many of their consultants makes it perfectly clear where they think such technologies originate. The Aerospace Division of the To the Stars Academy lists electrogravitic propulsion and beamed energy launch systems as being aspirations. UAPs, of course, are UFOs. It's the UK Ministry of Defence terminology that I popularised in the 90s, and which has now been adopted by politicians, the public, the media, and even rock stars like Tom DeLonge. In parallel with all this, various major defence corporations, aerospace companies, and private space companies throw money at what they call fringe science, in parallel with research and development programs for aircraft and space vehicles that look like they belong in a science fiction movie. This is part of a new space race that's going on. If anyone doubts that, ask yourself why the United States Air Force had a space command, and why President Trump has floated the idea of a space force. There's a new space race for sure, but unlike the old 20th century space race between the United States and the Soviet Union, there are more players in this new space race. It's not just the US and the Russians, but the Chinese, the Japanese, defense corporations, aerospace companies, tech billionaires, and venture capitalists. For any of the players in this new space race, the acquisition of usable alien technology would make them the winner, and from then on, the sky's the limit. Or maybe not. Let's give the final word to Arthur C. Clarke. He once said, "Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying." I agree. The question of whether there's other life in the universe is probably the biggest and most profound question we can ask. But it's a question that may be answered sooner than we think. In a field where there are so many uncertainties, only one thing is certain. The day we make first contact will be the day that changes our world forever.